Good morning, folks, and welcome. So I had a bit of time recently. I've been kind of busy, but I had a bit of time to go and test the new prayers on the beta worlds, and I was incredibly disappointed. I don't know if I was so as disappointed as much as like I kind of knew how it was going to be based on what they were already polling and whatnot, but actually like trying them and using them in action kind of confirmed all that. So in short, not good. And this sentiment is very, very much echoed throughout not just the high-level community, but all of RuneScape's communities. Everyone hates the new Prayerbook. And I know it's in beta, and I know they're going to do changes, and that's kind of the point of what we're doing, is to introduce some of those ideas for what they could change to make things better. And this is done very carefully, and this was a 4-hour process, done on stream with hundreds of people, in the idea of like coming together, adding ideas, and trying to fix the problems while, again, keeping it very risk versus reward based as a premise. And also another premise for this was it's going to be a spellbook that starts at level 60 prayer. You get it from a Grandmaster PVM based quest, and you unlock 4 PVM bosses from it. This is a PVM spellbook. It's an upgrade to PVM, which is what the spellbook Prayerbook really does. Of course it's an upgrade to things like PvP as well, but like in terms of progression for the game and something you unlock via PVMing, which is what a lot of the game is becoming nowadays, that's where we're trying to make it fit. It's meant to be a higher level prayer book for people who want to get better at PVM or are better at PVM, and it will help them do more damage at the cost of more risk. So I'll stop ranting on about it, but that's the idea. And I will link this spreadsheet in the description or in the comments for anyone interested who wants to like input on it or has, you know, agreements with it and is like, okay, this is cool, keep that in mind, or like hit Jagex with please do this or don't do that, whatever. It's about throwing ideas around anyway. So let's actually dive into the biggest problem. Well, actually, let me start with the bonuses right now. So up here on the top left, the bonuses from the spellbook: 7% range strength, 7% melee strength, 4% magic strength at the cost of 25% defense on all styles. 25% defense we take for granted nowadays, but that is a lot of defense. A lot of defense. And that's getting wiped completely out, so it's a general bonus thing you're always going to have on when fighting, but you're going to be less tanky. If we combine that with the... and bear in mind, this is like very well made. This is very well balanced. It's one of the best parts of the prayer book is these damaging spells. Damaging prayers, I keep calling them spells. It's very good. And it's one of the best, if not the only thing that's truly balanced on there. And if we combine it with this section down here, these deflect prayers currently, they do a little bit of like recoil damage, but you take 10% chip. So if something hits you with a 5, you take a 1, but if something hits you with like a 20, you take a 2. And it doesn't sound that crazy, but a lot of NPCs are going to hit you like 30, 40, and it's just going to be 3s and 4s non-stop. Imagine if every time you stepped into a CM Ulm, instead of just taking like a 2, a 3, and then a 30, you would take like 2, 3, 3, 30, 2, 3, and you would never not take that 2 or 3 ever. Again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but what if you went to like Mystics? Mystics have a max hit of like 30 through prayer CM. Suddenly you're taking 2, 3, 2, 3 for the entirety of the room. What about when you get to Mutadile and you're getting chipped there? Oh boy. I mean, it hits a lot anyway, but its max hit is like 30, 40, 50 with range. You're at the tree, you're chopping away, you're praying range, comes up and bites you, hits a 0. Oh no, it doesn't, hits a 5. Magic from the water, hits a 0. Nope, hits a 4. And this is the problem. It's like every little bit of content will have that one place that chip is just incredibly frustrating or not fun to deal with. And I get that it's something that makes the game harder, it's a risk factor, but it's not a fun risk factor. It's not an interesting. It is a tedious and frustrating risk factor. So basically, we don't like chip damage, and we learned this from TOA. I promise I'll stop in a minute. But we learned this from TOA. Is a reason why practically nobody in the game who is of any decent level uses quiet prayers, because it's not fun to be chipped. It's not good to be chipped. It's much better if you want to design punishing things to add to the game to make it harder, to add interesting or not tedious, but more difficult boss mechanics that you have to deal with. And this is kind of the way that I talk about chip, is like, it should be a property of NPCs. In particular, NPCs in an enrage phase, or in a race to the death, make much better chip damage places. The best example is probably Verzik P3. There is a level of urgency needed and you are very aware you're getting chipped every 5 ticks with a 10 to a 15, like realistically in that range. And that's enough for you to be able to have to manage your supplies better, and also realize you have to continually do DPS. So it's the kind of thing that if you put in the right place works very well as a stress mechanic, but you don't want that stress in your everyday game. It's just not fun. Now, if you want to do this as well, if you want to have chip, you have to be aware of all of the bosses that you're going to release into the game in the future, so that they can't be something like a 30, they can't be bosses that essentially switch attacks a lot and have high damage on those, even if you could predict them, because you're still going to get hit. So it's a limiting factor on what content they can even produce in the first place, which is very bad. So they should do it very selectively, and they should add it as a boss property. That's my spiel on chip damage. It's very bad. So how do we fix it? We do 100% damage reduction for the correct parade style, and you can have these cool new icons or whatever. And the point is that these work the same as the regular ones, but you take 10% damage from incorrect styles. And the purpose of this is to add the risk factor back in. If you want to use these prayers, if you flick correctly, nothing's going to happen. But if you do flick incorrectly, you're going to get very punished because you have less defense now, and you're taking 10% on top of that. Now this number can be fixed along with a lot of the other numbers, but the point is, it's a much better way to do it. And I hope all the fellas on Reddit who voted for this style of whatever this chip stuff is understand that's a bad thing now and are willing to listen a bit to this. So it punishes bad gameplay or inability to flick, and it makes for a higher skill ceiling and rewards better prayer usage. Simple. Good stuff. So that's the main bonus over here of the minor bonuses, reduced defense. And then if we change the chip damage to a full damage reduction with a penalty on other styles, great. There's our base, everything sorted. The symmetry stuff, I think I already said, but the symmetry stuff is really fixed. I think they're going to do it on Runelight, so that's okay. And there's only a couple of things left. So let's run through on the top right real quick. I'll get onto the vows at the end because that's a bit more complex. Vindication is broken. It's too strong. And it does one very annoying thing, and that is it forces players to live in their inventory, and it forces players to non-stop be using Locator Orb. You Locator Orb, you get some prayer back, you hit something for 10% damage, rinse and repeat. Imagine doing Olm, and it would be efficient only if you hit your Locator Orb, got your prayer and hearts tick on the right attack, and then attacked Olm. Nightmare. Nightmare. You would never want to play like that. And it's the kind of thing that you're getting forced into this corner for doing. So, personally, I do not think that anything that gives you direct DPS should exist other than the damaging prayers. So something like this that does essentially 10% bonus damage needs to be scrapped without a doubt. It's just silly, basically. So changing it so it's just a better redemption is basically the only thing I could think of to make it relevant, and redemption is still a useful prayer. So a slightly better redemption, maybe heals 5 run energy as well. Okay, that's fine. It was already really strong, it's still really strong, but let's not keep it as broken as it was. On the right here, Rebuke. Now Rebuke can go one of two ways. It can stay the same, which is okay, which is a risk-reward factor, and that's kind of fine. But again, it's one of those things where you live in your inventory. It's something that is very useful and does damage to things, so you are almost forced to use it to be efficient. And that's not a fun way to play. If you want to make things that help you do more DPS, make it like a boss mechanic that you have to interact with, like Skulls at Warden or something like that. Something more interesting. So this is reliant on them actually introducing more interesting mechanics that keep you engaged, as opposed to just oh, I've got to Rebuke now, got to Vindicate now, got to Rebuke now. That's not fun. And if you do things like that, they become something akin to abilities, which is something that belongs in a spellbook, not a prayer book. Prayer book should contain passives that can be on all the time when you need them. These two things are things that you use to gain damage in an instant, and you need to constantly go back and do them. So now to tie this back into vows and how I've resorted out vows, vows are now passive. And they're not just broken DPS passives, they're actually useful passives. So they should all have pretty high prayer drain, and they should be niche. So Fumus's one, which was a poison one, instead of dealing bonus poison damage, which is a forced thing you have to use, it now just does poison or venom damage to your prayer instead of your HP. Useful for a fair few scenarios. And it basically smites you at the cost of not taking venom damage, which would make a lot of sense. That's a risk versus reward thing in itself. Umbra's Vow. Attacks reduce your target's defense by 5% of the damage dealt, up to 15%. Mini Warhammer on attacks. Lovely. is good. That's what they need to do, more of that. And I'll jump over Cruel's Vow to Glacie's Vow real quick to say that currently as it is a 2% flat damage increase. And what did I say about flat damage things? It's something that the player is forced to use. If you want to play anything close to efficient, you will be forced to use this. What's another problem with these things? Very high prayer drain. So you're forced to use this 2% flat damage increase, and already at high level PVM we have no inventory space. We are stuck with restores and no brews. It is miserable. I wish, to give this, to put this in perspective, when I do no Pillar Inferno, I bring 1 brew nowadays. I would love to bring 10. I have no space. When I do regular Inferno, I don't bring brews anymore. There is no space for brews. You can survive without them just fine, but there is actually no space for brews. It's really frustrating. So having like more drain that you can't even flick, it's a nightmare. Anything that does this, like basically Fumus's Vow, Glacie's Vow, Vindication, and Rebuke are all like that, which is why we're changing 3 of them and kind of leaving the minimal one as Rebuke, if this makes sense. So the way to change it anyway is to make it magic level reduction, 5% of the damage dealt up to 15%. The same as Umbra's Vow, just for magic. Just makes sense, right? Passive thing that is useful for a small period of time, turn it off, deal with it, done. Lastly, Cruel's Vow. So Cruel's Vow, currently it's like 1% damage heal, which is utterly pointless, I'm gonna be honest. Like, if you put this in perspective, across the entirety of Ulm, in a solo, you heal like 30 HP. I mean, 30 HP is not a lot, it's like 1 hit from Ulm. And that's if you had Cruel's Vow on the entire time. You would be smited on P1, let alone getting to P2. So this is very clearly not balanced, and it is the same problem as Blood Fury on release, dead content and less buffed. The fact that we don't even have to play around with that, and you can just tell it based on stats, is very, very silly. But anyway, one thing to do to change it would be to change the 25% chance heal to 10%, equating to 2.5% healing. For context, Blood Fury 6%, and Soul Split used to be 20% and 40% in PvP, to give like some numbers around that. So it's not quite as half as good as a Blood Fury, but it does a little bit more. You're getting like, 70 HP during an Ulm. That's actually kind of decent. But of course, that's still not really enough. So how do we make it so you use it for very niche scenarios, but not on all the time to get the benefit? Well, you have this 3 HP heal on NPC death, same as Death Charge, or same as the yellow Keras from TOA. You attack something, you get smited a little bit, but you gain some HP. Risk versus reward, a balance of attributes that you can use, and you don't have it on all the time, you just flick it on for the NPC death. Or if you're not sure about the exact death window, keep it on for a couple of seconds, and so maybe you lose like 8 prayer, but you gain 3 HP. Now the balance numbers on how much prayer it uses and how much HP you gain could be different. I think maybe -3 prayer would be fine. You probably lose 5 total that way because of the drain. That's okay. But that's a way to make it niche at a moment instead of on all the time, which is what all the vows really should be, because they drain a lot. And I will also say that none of these vows are really necessary to do PVM effectively. Which is why, as we move on from vows, going down to that part over here, these things are all untradeable and guaranteed drops at a certain KC. And you might say, well, why untradeable? Because untradeable drops are what makes the progression of the game really tick. It's what makes the feeling of playing the game and upgrading your character a lot more real, and give you actual things that you have earned yourself to prove that. An example of this is like B-Gloves, Dragon Defender, Assembler, Fire Cape, Infernal Cape, Skilling Capes, all this stuff on the right hand side. All of these are basic PVM upgrades that mark a point for your account that they have passed from and into the next stage. And it's a real frustrating thing that in recent times we have only really had the TOA pouch and the gems, which aren't really that strong. The pouch is kind of okay, but it's not the likes of Piety or MA2 Cape or Infernal Cape or Defender or Assembler. So we need more of these things in the game. For players, when they get to that point and they've completed all these things, they want more things to try and go for. That might take even just 2 or 3 days, but really adds to an account and feels like you're completing more of it. And before anyone says this is like making it like Iron Man mode, come on now. A few things that are like this that have been in the game for many years, and a few more that are added at select times, especially like once a year, hardly close to Iron Man mode. And of course you still have the tradable boss drops from DT2, the more serious ones you can still get on a main account. These niche things, being able to earn them makes a lot of sense. I think the way they have it currently is that they want to do it where they only have 4 of these prayers drop 1 from each boss. but it would make a lot of sense that for the 4 bosses, they have the 4 vows that come from them as well. So we'll see how that goes. But this is one very important part that pertains to like game health and progression of all accounts. So it's a very interesting topic as well. I think I've gone through like most of this now. I do want to say that down here on the right, down here on the right hand side, prayer drain amounts. These guys should be the same as the regular spellbook. You're already getting punished for using them. These guys here should be slightly less than smite, so they're still pretty draining. The vows are still very draining. But again, there are passives and you use them particularly at very particular times. And lastly, these like attacking prayers, a bit more than piety, augury, and rigor, because they're a bit stronger. And that's it. That's all you really got to do to balance this. It's not a whole lot really, but it is very important. As it stands right now, I am very, very unhappy with it. So again, I hope they change some of these things or listen to some extent to just even a few points here. And it would go a very, very long way. But that's my like breakdown of how they are currently, what I think should be changed, and why. So if you've got any thoughts, leave them in the comments or tell me I'm completely wrong. But either way, keep it somewhat constructive. That's kind of it. And the link to this will be in the description. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.